This episode of The Charity Show is brought to you by The Good Studio, creating great content for good causes. Every week across the length and breadth of the UK, hundreds of thousands of people turn up for the charities they care about. They fundraise, they volunteer, they lead, they worry about budgets and beneficiaries and board meetings. And then they do it all over again, week after week. This is The Charity Show, the podcast made by charity people for charity people. Every episode, we sit down with someone doing something brilliant in the sector and have a proper, honest conversation about the job, the challenges, the wins, and everything in between. Whether you're a CEO, a trustee, a fundraiser, a comms professional, or a volunteer giving a few hours a week to a cause you love, you're in the right place. If you're new here, hit follow wherever you get your podcasts. You won't want to miss what's coming up. And if you've been with us for a while, a 5-star rating takes about 10 seconds and makes a genuine difference to how many people find the show. So then, here's what's coming up in episode 43.
I think what's happened over the past 10 years is that a greater range of opportunity has been created and developed around volunteering. One of our big strategic challenges is to shift the public's understanding of our charity from an organisation that is really about rehoming cats. We as an organisation have, I think, a responsibility to advocate on behalf of cats.
77% of charities saw their fundraising income either grow or stay stable in 2025. And the proportion reporting actual income growth has risen from just 27% in 2021 to 45% last year. Welcome back to The Charity Show. I'm Piers Townley.
And I'm Tim Baden. Great to be back once again, Piers. How are you doing? What have you been up to over the last couple of weeks?
Well, we're in full-on BTAM mode, Tim. As you know, for the Brain Tumour Charity, this is coming up in March. It's our big Brain Tumour Awareness Month. It's a nationwide campaign or a nationwide celebration of everything that the charities in the brain tumour field do in terms of policy and support and awareness, and a massive fundraising drive as well. So just knee deep in that, really planning for our Twilight Walk, which is our big London walk happening later on in March, and our policy work and our fundraising campaigns that are going on. So yeah, it's been pretty full on. And then this week has been brilliant. We've had comedian and actor Miles Jupp. He's going to be guesting on the Brain Tumour Charity's own podcast show coming up for that March. And he was talking about his own brain tumour diagnosis. He was diagnosed with a meningioma brain tumour, quite a rare but also quite a common one for his age group, and he was diagnosed in 2021, and he used his experience and his diagnosis to feature as part of his tour, which he's just been doing. He's just come back, I think, from America, and his tour was all last year. It was called On I Bang, and he came onto our show and doing all the recordings for that this week, and he's just wonderful, a great supporter, speaks so passionately about the cause and so heartfelt about his own symptoms, his own diagnosis. So he's a fantastic addition to our sort of our cohort of people that are helping us to raise awareness of what we do at the charity. So a busy week. How about you, Tim?
Yeah, very good. That sounds interesting, Piers. When you talk to a comedian, does he bring an element of humour to the conversation about a very serious topic?
He did, actually, strangely enough. And, you couldn't think of anything less humorous than having a brain tumour diagnosis. But we titled our own one, Tumour Humour. And because he actually based his stand-up show, his entire stand-up show was based on his own brain tumour, we kind of explored that. And he went and described how humour, not for everyone, obviously not for everyone, but it can be a support system. It can be a coping mechanism. He talks about, using humour to sort of deal with these things that are thrown at you in life. And he talks very eloquently about it. It's actually... yeah, I'm going to champion it. When it comes out, we should talk about it perhaps more on the show and that, but a really interesting take on it. And he was being interviewed by one of our supporters who has a very similar brain tumour to him, and the amount of support and the amount of inspiration that flew between them is just fantastic. So he's very much admired. So, hats off to Miles for sharing that with us.
Yeah, amazing. We'll have to try and get him on this show, Piers, if we can persuade him to come on here. Be nice.
Oh, he's a fantastic storyteller. I could listen to him all day.
Great. There you go. There's your challenge. Go and get him onto our show. Busy week for me, but it's been half term, isn't it? So I've been trying to balance work and family this week. It's never never easy. But then again, it's been such rubbish weather, isn't it? It's just been, I know, I think last few episodes we've been banging on about the weather, but I am properly fed up with it now, because it's ruined half term really, in terms of it's just been a washout. So that's not been great. But apart from putting up with the crappy weather, I've been so I volunteer for my local running club. I'm on the committee for our running club, and coming up to AGM time. And it just kind of, I really enjoy that side of getting that sort of glimpse into, it's a charity, obviously, but it's a very small, and it's an entirely volunteer-led charity. So I quite enjoy that real hands-on part of sort of getting, helping to sort of run the club and get things organised, and all those kind of things that every small charity has to do, and work through, and make sure that you follow the right due diligence when it comes to organising things like your AGM. So we're stuck into AGM stuff at the moment, and that kind of things. There is going to be a quiz apparently at this AGM though, so I'm looking forward to the quiz, getting involved in the quiz. So there's that. What else have we been doing at home? We've been doing a big charity shop sort out. I think it comes to that time of year that after, when you get into the new year, start getting into sort of February sort of time, and you realise you've got to start clearing some stuff out. So we've been doing that whole charity shop clear out. But this is a debate that we're having in the family at the moment, and I'm sure you might have had it as well, and we've talked about it on the show: Vinted versus charity shop. So my daughter and my kids are like, well, I can sell that on Vinted. And I'm like, really? You're going to make £1? Is it worth the effort? We could just give it to the charity shop, and they might make a bit more out of it, and you don't have to the hassle of taking it to the shop and all that kind of stuff. Do you have that debate, Piers, or is it just me?
All the time. My daughter's exactly the same, but she really does have the money in her mind. She's like, if I buy it for that amount, I'm going to sell it for that amount. And I'm like, okay, you really are being quite capitalist about it. But yeah, anything that was, we'll just give that away. Nothing. I think it's got £1 value on it at the moment. They're all little budding entrepreneurs.
They are. Yeah, although we end up doing the work. That's the thing. Who's going to take it to the post office? Yeah, probably going to be me, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing the legwork.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, all those kind of things going up. Also, it's Lent as well, Piers. I don't know if you're religious or anything like that, but William, my son, has given up. We're trying to give up all sugar for Lent. I've made a bet that he can't do it.
That's a tough one. It's all the hidden sugars that are the hard thing, aren't they? Things in like sweet drinks and cakes and stuff. Oh yeah. No, I don't think we would try. We wouldn't last very long in our house.
No, so there we go. Anyway, listeners, tell us what you're giving up. Love to hear what you're giving up for Lent, if you've given anything up. See ya. Now then, our guest today leads one of those organisations that almost everyone in the country has heard of, but probably doesn't know half as much about as they think they do. Cats Protection has been around for nearly 100 years. It rehomes tens of thousands of cats every year. It runs on a remarkable combination of around 1,000 staff and 10,000 volunteers. What a huge number. And it's led by a man who has spent his entire career in the voluntary sector, from teaching in schools and refugee camps to leading a global youth award across 130 countries. John May OBE, now also CVO after the 2025 New Year Honours, became Chief Executive of Cats Protection in 2022. And Piers and I sat down with him last week to talk about volunteering, fundraising, leading at scale, and what it really takes to run an organisation of this size and reach. John, welcome to the Charity Show. It's lovely to see you today, and thank you for joining us to talk about Cats Protection and all that you guys are doing. And just before we started recording, we asked you where your cat was. We were expected to see your cat on your lap. Where's your cat?
Ah, dear, Blenheim. Blenheim is not the greatest brand ambassador, I'd have to say. He is singularly unimpressed by the idea of either sitting on my lap or sitting in this room. If he sat in this room, he'd be just pouring at the door trying to get out. He is much, much keener to be with my husband. So we'll let him do
That's
that.
A great name for a cat, by the way. That's a great name for a cat. Is there a story behind that? Is he originate from Blenheim Palace or something? Where's the?
If only. No, he doesn't. He's a rescue cat. He was named because the folks in the adoption centre phoned me at the moment that I was about to get on stage at Blenheim Palace to make a speech about something or other, and so consequently, Blenheim just seemed to be the perfect name.
Excellent. I love that. That's brilliant. Lots to talk to you about today, and we want to touch on a few different things. And volunteering is one of the things that I'm really keen to talk to you about. And Cats Protection is one of those charities that everyone recognises, everyone probably aware of, but maybe not. Maybe everyone doesn't quite realise how volunteer powered it is. Over 10,000 volunteers is an extraordinary number, if I'm right, and please correct me if I'm wrong. When you think about leading something of that scale, what's the biggest sort of leadership challenge people might not necessarily see from the outside when you're talking about that number of volunteers?
Well, you're bang on. Yeah, 10,000 volunteers and about 1,000 staff. I had no idea before I took on the role as CEO 3 years ago just what an enormous force this charity is. And I guess the biggest challenge is around recognising the way in which voluntary organisations like ours have evolved and changed over the past 30, 40 years. And I'd like to think that we are beginning to get towards the sweet spot that I'd really love to see. So, I mean, if you think back, we're nearly 100 years old. We're going to be 100 years old next year. And when we were started by an amazing woman called Jessie Wade back in the last century, and she was a suffragist. She was an animal welfare campaigner. She was a feminist, an activist. She was an amazing person, and she gathered around her a group of volunteers, as so many charities did, to do something that she felt was really, really important to her. And then what happened, again, along with so many voluntary organisations, is that I would say in the 1960s and 70s, things began to move, and the staff that were employed by the charity moved from being more than just a secretariat to having a professional expert role to play, both in the running of the charity and also in the delivering of its vision and mission. And in our case, that was about animal welfare. And that expertise and experience of the professional staff grew and grew as the charity grew throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s. And my sense is that, like many voluntary organisations, the balance between, and it's always difficult to talk about power, but the balance of influence shifted from the volunteers, and the pendulum came across to staff. And my sense is that there is a sweet spot in the middle where genuine partnership between volunteers and staff is properly understood. And I think this is particularly true in voluntary organisations like ours that depend upon not just volunteers in terms of governance and fundraising, but in the delivery of frontline services. And my background is in the youth sector, and I would say the same in the voluntary youth sector. And what I'd like to feel that we're doing in Cats Protection now is that we are pulling together the experience and expertise of all parties to create what is genuine partnership rather than a tension between the two. And I find that really, really fascinating.
It is amazing, actually, John, because I'm just thinking all charities have that kind of their USP is we're there for our supporters are first. I mean, at the Brain Tumour Charity where I work, we are, our supporters and our volunteers are our lifebloods, but with you, that model is completely on the other set. I'm just wondering how much of a different kind of mindset culturally you think that has compared to other charities who possibly aren't so volunteer heavy or so
Well, my personal experience has always been in volunteer-driven frontline support. whether that's been I mean, organiser. I've been a volunteer in the Scout movement since I was 18. I've run the Duke of Edinburgh's award globally as its Secretary General, and I ran something called Young Enterprise, which you'll know is a brilliant charity that uses the voluntary power of teachers and business expertise to help young people learn. So I've always been in that space, and it's always seemed to me to be a space that isn't necessarily always appreciated and understood as being a bit different within the sector as a whole. And I find it absolutely fascinating, because when it works, the partnership can really make magic happen. When it doesn't, what you end up with is mistrust and politics and that sense of disconnect and tension that I think can be very, very unhealthy.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. Lots of different challenges there. And interestingly, when we've talked about volunteering on this show before, and we've talked to the likes of NCVO, and we've talked to other organisations specifically about volunteering and how it impacts them, what we've seen quite a lot, I'm sure you'd agree, Piers, and if you think back on some of the conversations we've had, is that volunteering seems to be almost in a state of flux, and that people are wanting more flexibility when it comes to volunteering. They want perhaps shorter commitments, sort of bite-sized volunteering, if you like, and sort of clarification on purpose and role and that kind of thing. Are you seeing that when you're looking at volunteering at scale in the way that you obviously are you seeing that play out in real time at the moment? Are you seeing those kind of changes being called upon from your volunteers?
The quick answer is yes. But I think that belies a much more nuanced reality. I think what's happened over the past 10 years is that a greater range of opportunity has been created and developed around volunteering. So I'm not sure that it's that people are just wanting to micro-volunteer. I think it may well be that a new demographic of volunteer is being introduced to volunteering through micro-volunteering experience.
Are you talking young people there, John? Is that what you're... Yeah.
Yeah, well, yes. Although, having said that, it's always difficult to go from scale to anecdote. But last night, I was visiting the St. John ambulance cadets in a local town, Banbury, in North Oxfordshire. There were 30 young people volunteering every week because they enjoy a sense of belonging, which is something that volunteering has always brought to people. And they were, when I really questioned them, they were driven by a desire to help other people. Well, that's no different from the motivation that I had when I started volunteering as a young person 40 years ago. So, although I think that there are possibly ways in which social media, digital work, the internet, and so on and so forth have perhaps created an expectation amongst consumers that you can do things in more bite-sized pieces, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is still, I think, in this country, a desire by young people and older people to support their communities in a more in-depth way. The challenge, I think, is to recognise that spectrum is more dynamic, perhaps, than it has ever been, and to look at the life cycle of a volunteer and recognise that their engagement at one point on that spectrum need not be permanent, and that they can move through it, along it, weave in and out of it as much as they like, and that we need to have organisations that can accommodate that.
And if that volunteer landscape is changing in the way you suggest, John, what does that actually mean for charities in terms of how they have to adapt their approach to volunteering, and how's that actually? What's Cats Protection doing as a result of that?
I think the biggest change is that there is much less appetite now to be involved in the management and governance of branches of charities. People want to be involved in impact and frontline work more than ever. And at Cats Protection, we have a model of volunteering that was created many, many years ago and was absolutely fit for purpose in a pre-digital age, which involved local branches run by volunteers with a coordinator, with a treasurer, with a secretary and a committee, and so on and so forth. And my sense is that the appetite to serve on those committees is getting less. And if I look at our volunteer branches around the country, the committees are often folks my age rather than younger. And that is not to say that they're not extremely successful, but they're all aware that, frankly, they're aging out. And so what I think we need to do is to be less structured or less single structured in our approach to how we support and govern our volunteering and manage our volunteers, and recognise that we don't necessarily have to have a one-size-fits-all approach. So where a local branch is running really successfully and is entirely supported by a committee and so on and so forth, that's absolutely brilliant, and I certainly wouldn't want to dismantle that. But the development of other models that maybe have more staff support, or maybe are supported virtually by a group of volunteers who are operating through Teams or other mechanisms, shouldn't be ignored. And I rather like that sort of mixed economy of ecosystem that we kind of grow and nurture, and we see what works in one place doesn't necessarily work in another, and are quite relaxed about that, rather than perhaps, as I would have been maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I started as a CEO of a national charity, wanting to create consistency in structures wherever I was in the country, because that felt like the right corporate thing to do.
So practically, John, with that, it's a kind of a more flexible and more adaptable approach to, say, the roles and the training and the expectations of people or the new cohort coming into the likes of Cats Protection. That is probably sector-wide, and it has to change. Organisations are having to become more flexible and more adaptable to address what you're saying, the fast-moving, without being generational about it, this very digitally savvy younger cohort that's coming through.
Yeah, I think so. But I don't think it's just about being digitally savvy. I think it's about just expectations on how much time you have to give, where you want to commit that giving in terms of the impact that it might have. And recognising that there isn't one right answer to this. If somebody wants to give their time and their talent, then surely we should be doing all we can, as long as it has an appropriate impact, to accept that offer at face value. And that means being much more flexible about the way in which we structure ourselves as organisations in order to accommodate that. And I mean, that feels like a BGO, a blinding glimpse of the obvious. but it's really hard to do in practice because all the processes and all the structures and all the organizational design up to now has been about delivering effective services through a single, through not through a single business model, but through a model that is no longer actually the only model that you can use. I nearly said fit for purpose, and I don't mean that, because I think the model, the current the traditional model is still fit for purpose in many places, but one must be ready to accommodate a much more diverse range of models, I think.
And that kind of goes against, I'm guessing, because I'm not at your level, but if you are at if you are in SLT, you are at the CEO level, your career has been based on kind of slightly a different way of looking at the way those structures are. It's not a natural leadership mentality, perhaps, maybe?
I don't know about that. My sense is that leaders have always tried to balance that need of the old John Adair action-centered leadership model of balancing task, group, and individual, and that's always been about adapting to needs and not insisting that you create a single process to suit the task. What he is doing is saying, we have to continue looking for that spot in the middle of the Venn diagram where the task, our mission, and our charitable needs coalesce with the individual drivers and needs and wants of our volunteers, and the way in which we choose to group those so that they have the biggest impact. And I find that fascinating, and I've always done so. And maybe because I myself have been volunteering for nearly 50 years, I have a healthy perspective of organizations as, if you like, the volunteer customer, as well as the person sitting in a driving seat as a leader of an organization.
John, can I ask you, do you think to be a good leader in this sector, being a volunteer is a must?
No. I don't think so. I think it gives a different sort of perspective. But I mean, that's a little like saying, I don't know, I used to be a teacher a very long time ago. And there used to be a saying that to be a good head teacher, you had to be a great classroom teacher to start off with. I'm not sure that that's really true. There is certainly a need for the experience of the volunteer or the experience of the subject expert or the leading practitioner in any organization to be recognized and respected. But do you as the leader have to have that direct experience yourself? No, I think you just have to have the empathy.
And just coming on to, just before we wrap up on volunteering, what advice would you give to smaller charities? And we have lots of people who work for smaller charities who listen to the show. Obviously, you're talking about volunteering on scale at Cats Protection, but for a lot of smaller charities, might just be looking at a handful of volunteers. What's one thing that you would think that, or one thing that you think they should think carefully about in regards to volunteering right now and over the next couple of years?
The most obvious thing that just immediately jumped to mind is about respecting the experience and expertise of those people who are offering the donation of their time and talent. And recognizing that, and this is the great thing I think about the voluntary sector, it's recognizing that, and I'm sorry because this is really obvious, but and yet we so often forget it. It's recognizing that people bring with them a whole set of different qualities, experiences, expertise outwith the role that they are immediately volunteering with. And if one gets to know them as individuals, you suddenly discover that you have this amazing resource on which you can call. And clever, I think, clever CEOs, clever boards of trustees, clever volunteer committees recognise that and don't feel frightened by it and don't feel threatened by it, but rather they do their skills audit and they go, crikey, do you know, I chair a charity here in Oxfordshire, and we've just taken on somebody onto our board of trustees who is the former HR director of a major blue chip company. Well, now, what's brilliant is that we can ask that person to take off their trustee hat occasionally and just say, could you just, give us a bit of advice on this? You're not being a trustee now. You're not the employer. You are this amazing resource that we can ask questions about in terms of HR. And I mean, that's just a wonderful position to be in.
And that's where trustees and volunteers add that extra value, isn't it? That's where they bring that experience and that depth that you might not necessarily have under your own roof, but you can pull on from those people who come in and support you voluntarily. But as you say, bring all this kind of world of expertise and knowledge with them. So it makes huge sense to take advantage of that.
I think so. And they bring a perspective that I think can be very refreshing, because I find myself often being quite constrained in my thinking because I'm living within the structure of decision making that exists within my organisation. And to have somebody just say, have you thought about so-and-so? Without trying to threaten me or take me on, I find that really, really refreshing. And I'm glad to say, I know we're talking at scale, but that certainly happens in Cats Protection. We have some amazing, amazing people, both staff and volunteers, who may have chosen to work with us doing something that is pretty entry level if one were looking at employing somebody, because that's what they want. They want to, we have some extraordinary people who come in and help to socialise kittens and sit in a pen with a group of kittens and socialise them.
Tough job. Someone's got to do it. It's a tough one.
Well, yeah, it's a lovely thing to do. It's absolutely lovely. And then you ask, so what do you do for the rest of your life? Well, actually, I ran my own company for 25 years. Oh, right. And I've been looking around and I think maybe you need to do something about X, Y, or Z. And that's, rather than feeling threatened by that, that's a gift.
Right, this is the part of the show where we take a look at what's been happening across the sector. Tim, what have you been reading about this week?
So my story this week is a piece of genuinely good news for the volunteering world, because the Big Help Out is back. For anyone who doesn't know, the Big Help Out was created back in 2023 as part of King Charles III's coronation celebrations, a nationwide event encouraging people to get out and volunteer. It was a big hit, with an estimated 7.2 million people taking part in that first year. Last year, it took a pause, but it's now been confirmed it will return on the 5th to the 8th of June 2026. And this time it's teaming up with the Big Lunch, the Eden Project's annual community get-together. The collaboration is being hosted by Matt Hyde, who co-founded the Big Help Out and is also CEO of Lloyds Bank Foundation, and Andy Jasper, CEO of Eden Project. They're saying it'll be the biggest version yet, with 36 major volunteering charities already signed up through the Shaping the Future with Volunteering network. The idea is to combine the warmth and community spirit of the big lunch, food, neighbours, fun, with the opportunity to try something new through volunteering. It's a compelling pairing when you think about it. And what's interesting timing-wise is that there's fresh data as well this week from Marie Curie showing that nearly half of UK adults, 47%, say they plan to volunteer in 2026. The appetite's clearly there. But the same poll found that 50% cite lack of time as the biggest barrier, and 22% worry about the level of commitment required. That's exactly the kind of thing a well-run, big help-out weekend, low barrier to getting involved, locally delivered, very flexible. That's exactly the kind of thing it's designed to address. So it sounds like a fascinating whole venture. Piers, what do you reckon? Big help-out? You're going to get involved?
Yeah, I love it. I'd love to. I'm going to look into it this year. I think it's just a fantastic setup. Yeah, hopefully gets a massive take-up this year. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Anyway, what have you spotted in the news this week, Piers?
Right, my story is one that I think a lot of people in the sector will find genuinely encouraging because it pushes back against a narrative that we hear quite a lot, which is that fundraising is in crisis, cost of living and everything else. It's all based upon the 5th annual Charity Pulse report from Enthuse, which has just landed. And the headline finding is this: 77% of charities saw their fundraising income either grow or stay stable in 2025. And the proportion reporting actual income growth has risen from just 27% in 2021 to 45% last year. That's an 18% percentage point improvement over 4 years. Just getting the maths right in my head there. So that's optimism for 2026 too. 64% of charity leaders say they feel positive about the year ahead, and the areas they're banking on most are corporate fundraising, events and individual giving. Mass participation events are clearly booming. 81% of charities plan to take part in major events like the London Marathon this year, up from 64% in 2025. And this is a subject that Tim and I have spoken up quite a bit on the programme now. Now, there are caveats to this report. 60% still identify the economy as a significant challenge, back to the cost of living crisis and all that again. And the wider picture on the number of individual donors is more complicated. CAF research has flagged that the number of people giving to charity has actually declined, even if the overall value of donation hasn't fallen. So the issue isn't necessarily what people give, it's that fewer people are giving at all. But overall, this report says that the sector is proving more resilient than many had feared, and that's worth celebrating, especially when you put it alongside a conversation like the one we had with John about how organisations like Cats Protection are adapting to make sure supporters stay connected for the long term. So it's great that this fundraising growth seems to be on the increase, but as always, Tim, and we always talk about this, we should be wary of statistics generally.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot to celebrate in that report. I think there's a lot of really, really encouraging stuff. But it's strange, isn't it? Because we see the news quite a lot. We trawl it week in, week out for stories. And there's always stats-related stories, and they always seem to contradict each other. So I think, it's all very positive, but you'd have to take it with a pinch of salt. And I think, obviously, as an individual charity, just go with what you're seeing rather than relying on what the national trends might be showing you, because you just don't know whether those stats are actually going to bear fruit. So yeah, mighty pinch of salt, I think, Piers.
And we also have that, don't we, Tim, often where they're like buses, aren't they? You wait for a report and all of a sudden 3 or even more come at once, and you're kind of left trying to jiggle out what is the main headlines.
Absolutely.
Welcome back. We've been talking to John May OBE, Chief Executive of Cats Protection, and we've covered a lot of ground already on volunteering and how the landscape is shifting. In this second half, we're going to go a bit deeper into the specifics of how you lead at that kind of scale. 10,000 volunteers spread across the country. How do you keep that culture consistent? How do you balance heritage with innovation? And where does John think all of this is heading? Let's pick up where we left off.
John, I want to move us on to talk about fundraising, if that's okay. And again, talking to different people on this show and different organisations that we've had on, we kind of get the feeling that we see it playing out in the news and when we look through anything in regards to the sector at the moment, that fundraising feels like it's under pressure everywhere in terms of regular giving, retail, legacy income, you name it. It feels like there's pressure everywhere at the moment in regards to fundraising. What are you seeing at Cats Protection in terms of supporter and donor behaviour? And what's that telling you? Where are things heading, or where do you see things? How do you see things panning out in the short and medium term?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely a challenge at the moment within the sector in terms of people feeling that their ability to give is less extended than perhaps it has been in the past. But I don't buy the idea that we have a crisis of generosity. Mm-hmm. I really do believe that people want to continue to give. I think the challenge for us, and we're going through this right now, is recognizing that there is, just as with a volunteer, there is a life cycle. So too there is with donors. And it's much more sophisticated than imagining that that somebody just fits neatly into one section of a donor a donor set of segments. And so what we've been doing over the past 18 months or so is doing some really detailed work on looking at our supporters and trying to understand them better. And part of that has been, like so many organizations, refreshing our our customer relationship management, CRM, and trying to recognize that the touch points that we have with people need to be joined up so that we can talk more articulately with our donors, and we can help them to understand better the impact that they're having, and therefore want to do more. And that also, of course, our supporter base overlays with our volunteer base in a really, really interesting way. And understanding that a fosterer may also be wanting, a cat fosterer maybe wanting to support us in terms of fundraising at a village fete, and maybe thinking about their legacy is something that perhaps we need to mature a bit more. And so we're working on that. I think we've been quite surprised as an organisation by a couple of things. The first is that our retail operation is really beginning to pick up and is not just washing its face, but making a surplus for the organisation. I think we a couple of years ago looked really closely at our locations, and we will continue to do so, and are running our retail operation, I think, pretty tightly, and making sure that we're in the right locations, where we're offering the right offers to the buying public. So that's one thing. And I think the other surprise for us has been that legacies are really holding up. Now, Cats Protection historically has relied and has benefited massively from legacies. 50% of our income comes from legacies, and the warning was that for one reason or another that was going to slow. Mm-hmm. But all the intelligence that we have and all the research that we undertake suggests that certainly in the short to medium term is not the threat that we thought it might be. And that's really, really pleasing, because it does suggest that people continue to care about charity and animal welfare specifically, amongst the other pressures that they may be having.
So fundamentally, John, your donor, your fundraising models and your mechanisms, not necessarily under threat, but are just having to evolve, just having to be looked at, which is kind of what all the organisations, all the third sector are feeling, I think.
I think so. And I mean, I think that the area where we are, I think, most interested in that evolution is in the community fundraising space. I think it's one where we need to be perhaps more canny about the way in which we organise ourselves, and I sense a bit more transparent about where and how much it costs to run an organisation of our size and why that's important. One of our big strategic challenges in terms of our vision and mission is to shift the public's understanding of our charity from, I mean, you mentioned it right at the top of the programme, Tim, an organisation that is really about rehoming cats. That's what people will often think of us as, and will probably think of their local branch rather than the national organisation. But we as an organisation have, I think, a responsibility to advocate on behalf of cats at a national and United Kingdom wide level, and to really influence the general public's behaviours in terms of how they treat the species. If we can help those that are fundraising to recognise that that's part of our responsibility and the impact that it can have on animal welfare, alongside, of course, the joy of an individual story of an individual cat that is in a better place because of the interventions that may have been made by volunteers or staff at a local level, then I think we have a more informed giving public. And that's where I'd like to be able to move.
I'm really fascinated by that, John, because I imagine Cats Protection has huge brand loyalty. You've probably got supporters, donors who've given to you for a very long time and already have written the charity into their wills and everything. So that huge brand loyalty there. How do you go about changing or not changing, modernising or adapting or evolving the charity's brand and ethos and vision and mission slightly, as you were suggesting, without alienating those people or making them feel uncomfortable, and essentially taking them on that journey with you?
Well, that's the $1 million leadership question. I think the way to do it is to be courageous about shifting brand, and I don't just mean a launch, a lunch, and a logo. I mean genuine brand and what that means, whilst helping those that, the way I've described it to folks within the organisation, our volunteers, is those of you who have already drunk the Kool-Aid, not to feel that we're somehow departing from the very reason why you chose to be part of this in the first place. We rebranded, or we refreshed our brand 2 years ago, and our having just said, it's not all about the logo. Our logo did change. We had a logo that was perhaps a bit folksy, and probably gave a message to people that we were uber local in the way in which we operate. And it didn't have a feel of a national organisation. We've now shifted that. Brand recognition amongst the general public is up. We got into a wonderful partnership with ITV last summer over the Women's Euros. And as a result, brought our brand to a whole set of new supporters. The challenge, of course, is you can bring them through the door, but then you need to steward them really effectively. And so I think the answer to your question, Tim, is that the answer is all in the stewardship. And ensuring that we continue to respect and steward effectively those that came through the door 20, 30 years ago, but also work out how best to steward those that are just discovering us for the first time. And And we've got a really interesting change in demographic because more and more young people are buying cats, often from the internet, which worries me, but that's another story, rather than adopting. But we have a responsibility to them and to their cats to ensure that they become the best owners they can possibly be. So our stewarding of a wider group of supporters who then come to us going, we need advice on how to look after this small furry creature that is sharing a house with us. We have an opportunity there to fulfill our charitable mission with a completely new set of a new set of people with a new set of expectations.
And does that mean doing things more, or not necessarily more creatively, but in a creatively different way?
It means, I think, recognizing that we are not just an organization that is about direct service, but actually we're an organization that is about a one-to-many approach to education. For years and years, Cats Protection has run a really superb education program, particularly in schools and in youth groups. But what we're now recognizing is that we actually have an educational imperative to follow in terms of the general public and helping them to be great owners of cats. And that's making us really think carefully, about the channels that we might use to reach folks. So that's why, our television advertising, for instance, over the past 24 months has, of course, been about fundraising, but it's also been helping folks to understand the impact that their actions can have on the cats with whom they come into contact. It's why we're beginning to look at ways in which we can engage differently through social media and through other channels in helping folks to understand. We have our own podcast. The Cat's Got Your Tongue, which is a terrific podcast.
And a great name.
It's not a bad name. It's not a bad name. We think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good name.
It has a brilliant listenership. So I hope that we're being innovative without institutional amnesia that then doesn't properly respect trusted channels with those volunteers and supporters who want to continue talking to us in the same way they always have. We still publish a paper magazine for folks because certainly up until now, the demand has suggested that people like to have something through the post to hold. But that doesn't mean we can't have a podcast as well. And it doesn't mean that we can't work on TikTok and elsewhere.
That's really interesting, John. I was going to say those sort of channels, so old school print, new school TikTok, in between that, traditional TV, some podcasts, these are tools, almost necessary tools to maintain a consistency then of strategy, of message, of impact across an organisation that is huge and diverse in terms of, locations as well as everything else. To maintain that consistency of messaging and culture, they're essential, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not a communications expert, as you two both are, but I am a campaigner, and my sense is that effective campaigning sees channels as method, not as objective. So you start off saying to yourself, so what is it I want to achieve? Now, what's the best way of doing it? Not, well, here's something nice and shiny. Let's see if let's use it to the detriment of the message that you're actually trying to purvey.
Piers and I are both old school magazine guys, so I love the fact that you still got a paper magazine. And actually, I mean, that is it seems to be increasingly rare in the sector at the moment. Charities seem to be closing down their print efforts. So it's nice to hear that you guys still have a print publication.
I hope that what we are is pragmatic, and not sentimental. Mm-hmm. So if the evidence came to us that the return on investment was not bringing in the effective impact, well then of course we would have to ask if that's a good use of charitable funds. Mm-hmm. In exactly the same way as I would in any other part of the charity. But what I'm not prepared to do ever is to fashionably either follow a particular route or exclude a particular route simply because that's working for everybody else. What I've learned is that different organizations need different things at different times, and different campaigns need different things at different times. And what you do is you make your decisions based on evidence, not based on fashion or necessarily where the rest of the market is going.
I think it's a very hard position to be in for any charity, but especially for a charity that has a long history and a deep heritage, because you've got to honour that heritage and that past, but you've also got to look, as we've been talking about how you innovate and how you look forward and how you evolve a brand and how you change. So that can't be easy for any charity, as I say, especially those like Cats Protection that has those deep roots, that long-standing history in terms of how you keep going without alienating people.
Well, I mentioned it's going to be our centenary next year. And that's a really good example of where you honour the past, but you look forward. I think it would be, and I mentioned just a moment ago, that question of use of charitable funds. It would be very easy and cosy to spend resource in quite a self-indulgent way on a centenary. And, have some parties and so on and so forth. But people who entrust their money in our charity want to see impact. We can help them to see the range of impact that they can have. But what that means is, of course, we will look back and of course we will celebrate. But actually, what we really want to do is we want to use our centenary as a launch pad for better animal welfare, better understanding of cats as a species, better owners, better law. And, it would be wonderful if next year or even next week, the government were to wake up to the appalling practices that exist, not just in this country, but overseas in terms of breeding cats, and look to regulate some of that. Because at the moment, it's a really, really frightening space. It would be great if we were to see better understanding of extreme breeds, and the pain that animals go through because owners want something that is Instagram pretty. We're not talking about, I get angry, but, I find it really, really frustrating that we have folks who are choosing to own cats and want to have a companion, but choose because they're not informed properly, choose a cat with the wrong characteristics for health. And we mentioned at the start that Blenheim is refusing as a cat to come and sit on my knee during it. But Blenheim.
John, is that you touched on it earlier on, but is that where you see the future in terms of Cats Protection being obviously maintaining its heritage in terms of welfare and education, but being more of a campaigning organisation? Is that where you see the future?
Yeah, campaigning and educating. That is not to say that our direct services don't continue to be really important. We still run, I think, the world's largest animal population management program through our sponsor, our supported neutering program that we offer around the country, and I'm really proud of that. And our volunteers, our 10,000 volunteers, are really proud to be part of helping to create a balanced cat population in this country. We will continue to directly be engaged in rehoming cats that need a new home for whatever reason that might be. And in those niches, I will continue to be really proud of some of the most extraordinary work we do. So, one of the things people don't know about us often is that we run a program called Lifeline, where we provide short-term fostering for animals who belong to the survivors of domestic abuse. Now, one of the things that stops people from leaving a relationship that can be very, very damaging is the fear that their pet will be hurt. And sadly, that fear is a very real one. We can do something about that in the short term. And we have a brilliant team of dedicated fosterers who help to do that. So that sort of stuff, that direct service will always be an essential part of what Cats Protection does. It's in the name, but also in the name is a bigger aspiration, and that aspiration is about saying we have a UK population. We have approximately 11 million owned cats in this country. And we have an opportunity for those cats to have happier and healthier lives if their owners understand some really simple things. For instance, forgive me, podcast listener, but I'm nevertheless going to tell you, did you know that cats really, really dislike having their water and their food side by side?
Huh. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that and I've owned a cat for ever. But genetically, they are disposed to keeping their prey away from their water source so that the two don't contaminate each other.
Sensible.
So when you buy those twin bowls from the pet shop and you put the water in one and the food in the other, the cat doesn't like it. If you separate it by about 2 meters, you have a much happier and much better hydrated cat.
Wow.
There you go.
I love that.
If our listeners go away with one thing, that's the thing, John. But also, just kind of coming towards the end of it, a very general question here, and you mentioned it earlier about the aspirations of Cats Protection. Would you give one piece of advice, and would you say it's along the lines of, with all the charity pressures and all the third sector pressures in there at the moment, it's just having that faith in your volunteers and the vision of your organisation? What kind of one piece of advice would you give as a leader to other would-be or currently are leaders out there in the sector?
I think it would be around trust.
Yeah.
And it's about trusting your people and trusting your intuition. And where the two of them may occasionally create tension, really explore that tension and why. I know I've spent many years trying to do both of those two things. Of course, always be led by evidence, but there is something around the wisdom that comes from folks who are delivering your services directly, whether they be staff or volunteer. That means that if you divorce yourself from that wisdom, you are doing yourself and the vision and mission of your charity a disservice.
Fantastic. John, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and to find out much more and to learn a few things about cats. I had no idea about the bowl and the water. There you go. I've learned something.
I'm about to go and tell everyone else that in the office now.
It's lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, John. Take care. Now, one of our favourite parts of the show, every week we talk to people leading big, well-known charities, Piers and I, and that's brilliant. We love talking to those guys. There's so much to learn from organisations like Cats Protection and from people like John, as you've just heard today. But the truth is the charity sector is built on the shoulders of thousands of smaller organisations that most people have never heard of. Organisations that are often run by tiny teams, powered by volunteers, operating on shoestring budgets and quietly changing lives every single day. And we think they deserve a platform. So this is the Small Charity Spotlight. If you work for a small charity or you know one that deserves a bit more recognition, we'd genuinely love to hear from you. Drop us a message at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or find the link in the show notes. Tell us who you are, who you support, and what would make the biggest real-world difference for your organisation right now. We'll do everything we can to bring your voices onto the show. So then, Piers, who have we got this week?
We've been contacted this week by Louisa, celebrating Tom's Trust. She says that it's an amazing charity that offers psychological support for children with brain tumours and their families. And it's a trust, it's a charity that we know very well at the Brain Tumour Charity. Louisa goes on to say they have specialist centres in Cambridgeshire, the North West and Oxford. And she used to work for them, but she still loves shouting about their work. And I will definitely echo that. Tom's Trust, a massive amount of good coming from them. Huge support to everyone in that community. And I'm going to read straight from their blurb about it. Tom's Trust is the UK's leading charity dedicated to providing psychological support to children with brain tumours and their families. By supporting the whole family, we help them to create their brightest possible future beyond diagnosis. And this website goes on to say that their clinical psychologists support hundreds of children and thousands of family members within hospitals in the UK, helping them from diagnosis to their brutal treatment and as they return to life at home. Our team will also be there to support a family if their child is dying or has sadly died from this devastating disease. So one very close to home there, Tim. We know them very well over at the Brain Tumour Charity, and this is another charity working in the field that does have this devastating diagnosis for children. So huge shout out there to Tom's Trust from Louisa. Thank you for getting in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Louisa. What a great charity. Fantastic work. We also heard this week from Kirsty Lawrence, who told us about Northumbria Blood Bikes. She told us that they are a charity run solely by unpaid volunteers who deliver blood and urgent medical supplies across the northeast of England out of hours. They also deliver blood to the Great North Air Ambulance every night and collect and deliver donated breast milk for neonatal wards. There are blood bike groups across the UK and they work closely together for larger relays of things such as samples for testing in specialist labs, sometimes items that need to travel vast distances and are time critical. They are a small charity but very dedicated and professional, and most of their work is unseen in the hours of darkness overnight. Incredible work there, because it's one of those things that probably everyone has no idea is there, but they rely on it, when they at those moments of crisis. So some incredible work there. Thank you, Kirsty. Fantastic.
Two more brilliant small charities this week, making a real difference with limited resources. And don't forget, if there's a charity you think we should feature, drop us a line at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or use the link in the show notes to put them forward.
And that's a wrap for episode 43. An enormous thank you to John May for giving us so much of his time and being so open and thoughtful about what it really takes to lead at scale in this sector. Volunteering, fundraising, culture, innovation. We covered a lot of ground, and I think there's something in this conversation for pretty much everyone listening. Well, I hope so anyway.
Absolutely. And if today's show has got you thinking about your own organisation, whether that's your volunteering model, your fundraising strategy, or just the way you think about culture and consistency, we'd love to hear from you. Get in touch at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com, or if you'd like to come on and share your story, do reach out. We'd love to welcome you onto a future episode.
All the links you need, including everything that we discussed today, are in the show notes. And we'll be back in a fortnight, so give us a follow on your usual podcast platform so you don't miss the next one.
And while you're there, please leave us a 5-star rating if you've enjoyed the show. It takes about 10 seconds, costs you nothing, and genuinely helps more people in the sector find us. That means more voices, more stories, and more the conversations that matter.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time on The Charity Show.